Fear is something that every single one of us experiences, but the reality is that most of us don't know how to adequately face it when it rears its ugly head. Your ability to understand your fear and how to use it to your advantage may be the difference between life and death. Today, I'm joined by Tony Blauer with Blauer Tactical Systems in a conversation every man needs to hear. We talk about handling confrontation effectively, when violence is the answer, how to become what Tony calls a courageous bystander, and how you can become more powerful by knowing your fear.
You're a man of action. You live life to the fullest, embrace your fears, and boldly chart your own path. When life knocks you down, you get back up one more time, every time. You are not easily deterred or defeated. Rugged, resilient, strong. This is your life. This is who you are. This is who you will become. At the end of the day, and after all is said and done, you can call yourself a man.
Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and founder of this podcast, the one you're listening to right now, The Order of Man. I am thankful and grateful that you are here, grateful that you're sharing the message, grateful that we are growing. In fact, I was looking at the numbers today. Last month was the single highest downloaded month to date in over 3 years. So thank you for being here and sharing this message of genuine masculinity, and one that I believe, and I'm sure you feel the same way, needs to be heard. The world needs to hear this message. And along that note, guys, I can't even begin to describe how excited I am that the book, Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men, is finally available. This has been years in the making, and I've put a lot of time and energy and effort into this over the past 90 to 120 days or so, and it is finally here. We launched just last week, and I'm absolutely blown away with the response that we've received so far. In 24 hours of releasing, we hit number one in multiple categories on Amazon and made it as high as number 35. 35 in all of self-help, which is tens of thousands of books. So I first and foremost want to thank you for the support on the book. I absolutely could not have done any of that without you. If you would like, the book again is now available for purchase. You can pick up your copy at orderofman.com/sovereignty. That will take you directly to Amazon. You can pick it up there. You can search for my name, Ryan Mickler, Michler. You'll find it there. Or search for Sovereignty. You'll find it there. You can find it. It's on Amazon. And of course, when you do that, you're going to join thousands of men who are going to be reading and applying the principles that we've been talking about here for 3 years in their lives. And if you've already started reading the book, I know that there's a ton of you who have already started reading the book. If you would, I need to ask that you please do this. Take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it takes. Head over to Amazon. Leave us an Amazon rating and review. This goes such a long way in bringing to light the message that we're sharing within the Order of Man. So again, head to orderofman.com/sovereignty. It's going to take you directly to Amazon. Pick up your copy right now. That's the only announcement I have, guys. I want to get right into this thing. My guest today is Tony Blauer. He is a self-defense expert and the creator of the s.p.e.a.r system, which stands for Spontaneous Protection Enabling Accelerated Response. Say that 5 times fast. I know that is a mouthful, but what he's been able to learn and develop and teach is how to harness the body's natural defense mechanisms to respond to a threat of violence effectively. He's been training special forces and LEOs since the 80s. He's one of the only experts who has effective training across all of the combat-related communities. That's self-defense, combat sports, military, law enforcement, every sector out there. And today you're going to hear the passion in his voice as he talks with us about stepping into the role of protector for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Tony, what's up, man? Thanks for joining me on the show today.
Dude, I'm very excited to be here.
I really like what I've seen of you, what you're doing, and I think this response to fear and knowing what fear is such a valuable component of being a man. You know, we talk about being a protector, a provider, and a presider, and obviously we're going to get more into that protection discussion of today, but why don't you help me understand and help our audience wrap our heads around the idea of no fear. And when I say no, I'm talking about KNOW, no
right.
fear. What do you mean when you're talking about that?
Well, it probably helped some of the listeners who, especially your audience, you hear the words no fear and you immediately think of the adrenaline company, the t-shirt company that sponsors a lot of the, motocross and bike and, extreme sports. About 20 years ago, I've been, teaching self-defense for decades, but about 20 odd years ago on a whiteboard session, we were talking, it was like no fear. Everyone had the no fear shirts. And I would tell people, I go, listen, man, I have so much fear in my life. So here I am, like the founder of the company, I'm talking to these groups, and I go, I had fear as a kid. I had fear as a wrestler. I had fear in gymnastics. I had fear as a skier. I grew up on skis. I'm originally from Canada, and you're either a skier or a skater. And I was one of the best skiers in Canada by the time I was 13, but I never won a race because my fear sabotaged my success every time I took off. It was always like, oh man, too bad you caught a tip. Too bad you skied off the course. You were going so, but I couldn't talk about it to anybody because I didn't know how to talk about it, right? So I remember one day I'm standing there and I got a no fear t-shirt on in front of a group of people. And I said, this shirt must be defective because I still have fear. And everyone laughs, right? And we just started talking about this idea. And I wrote the word no, N-O, fear on a whiteboard. And then suddenly you see the K and the O. And you go, really, what we're doing is the ability to make any decision in life comes down to, when you peel that fucking onion, it comes down to, can I manage my fear? So who I talk to determines who I end up marrying. Where I live, how much money I make, how much weight I lift, whether or not you protect yourself or your family or be a courageous bystander. At the moment of truth, it all ties to our ability to manage fear. Like number one fear is public speaking. Right? You would think that getting knocked out and thrown in a trunk and driven to a secondary crime scene would be like the number one fear in the world, but it's public speaking. Yeah. And then it's like, so it's just weird how people think of the real confrontation as like this specter in the dark, but the real confrontation is how you talk to yourself.
Is the idea of knowing fear just a matter of putting yourself in situations that cause you anxiety and fear? Is there more to it? How do you begin to understand what your body does and physiology and psychology when you start to get into scary situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you've got a specialty profession, like if you're military or law enforcement, you need to stress inoculate. You reverse engineer scenarios. If you're with a good unit or team, they will look at the area of operation and shit that you may face, and they will intelligently create. So you're actually, in that case there, you're seeking going from your comfort zone to your discomfort zone to what I lovingly refer to as the holy shit zone. And you're doing that in a calculated, systematic, intelligent way, because that type of training is dangerous and there's risk, and some people, can get seriously hurt. But that's where and this is such a good question, Ryan, because I get people who ask me all the time going, hey, to learn how to manage fear, should I do things like that scare me? Mm-hmm. And I go, yeah, but not if they're really dangerous and you don't know what you're doing, because now that's just stupid.
Sure.
Fear is an emotion. Latin for fear, I believe, translates as to move away from. But what we don't want to do, and what I talk about in our workshops and our seminars, is this, what I call emotional inertia. So inertia, from the physics term, but emotional inertia is your body's inability to move, because the emotional psychological connection creates this kind of pull, and now your cognitive brain and your reptilian brain are kind of locked, and now you're fetal. That has absolutely dire consequences, like in an active killer situation, in a rape, in a mugging, but it also probably produces procrastination and hesitation and doubt. And so now someone, years later, it's that old proverbial rocking chair test where somebody goes, like you're sitting in the rocking chair going, man, I should have done that. Well, why didn't you move? Why didn't you start that job? Why didn't you ask that person to marry you? And I believe this, and I've been doing this now going on 40 years, man. When you peel that onion and you get inside somebody's head, they will say, maybe in different words, I was afraid to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. One of the things that I've seen you talk about is the startle flinch response. Is this what you're talking about here, or is this something entirely different?
So the startle flinch is more of the physiology of a stimulus being introduced too quickly. So a butterfly and a bumblebee can make you flinch if you turn around and there's like an insect right there. There's a micro flinch. The whole startle flinch So what I do, like I teach a program called Be Your Own Bodyguard. The basis of it is the S.P.E.A.R system. My main clients are military and law enforcement. But since I'm 20 years old, I'm 57 now. Since I'm 20 years old, my singular focus is trying to make people safer, good humans safer. The Startle flinch was something I discovered accidentally during a drill in 1988. During a drill I lovingly refer to as the sucker punch drill, where I had one of my protege students who was a really good boxer. He had gloves on. I had a mouth guard on. We were close quarter. We were filming this in the old days, VHS. Some of your listeners don't know what VHS is. Google it. But we're filming this shit. And basically for about an hour, I got the shit punched out of me. I mean, I thought I was going to wax on, wax off everything. And this is before the Karate Kid, right? Because it was just like a drill, an isolation drill. But what I had done is I said, hey, real life isn't a sparring contest where you agree to a certain weight category, certain rules. Just shit happens to you.
Right.
I said, let's go outside the box here. And I said, his name was Warren. I said, Warren, you're going to put these 16-ounce boxing gloves on, and you set up any scenario you want. And in the middle of the scenario, I'm going to start talking to answer it. So he could be a loan shark. He could be bum on the street panhandling. And then he was going to just erupt at extreme close quarter with his punches. Well, I really thought, this was like a private thing, I really thought I was going to do a lot better. And it's wonderful how the ego and pride can sometimes, introduce you to a new lesson in life. I mean, I just literally at the end of this, bro, I had like a mouse under both eyes. I was bleeding from my mouth. My face was swollen. I was sitting at my desk. We didn't have whiteboards. This was 1988. I'm sitting at my desk. I just popped some Tylenol or whatever. And I'm sitting there with my hand on my head and an ice pack on me going, what the fuck was that? As I started to replay what was happening and look at the video, I saw that every time I flinched, I never got hit clean. That every time I tried to parry, slip, bong sao, tan sao, do some sort of martial art move, because I've been studying all these arts, that when I tried to interfere with what was spontaneously happening with a complex motor skill, that I was always late. And so what we learn, and what we learn all these years later, is that your reptilian brain, the limbic system, the amygdala, bypasses cognition during sudden violence and that's why, like, if you come into class joking around and teacher says, okay, put your books on the floor, I'm giving you a quiz, why do people draw a blank and then after say, I knew all the answers, I froze.
Right.
And it's the same thing. So stimulus being introduced too quickly creates this startle flinch, which is a relationship with the brain and the body. And if there's no threat of physical violence, of course, there's no physical movement. You're not covering your head or pushing away danger. But the startle flinch is the foundation, the behavioral foundation, the physiology, the physics, and psychology behind my self-defense protocol.
It sounds like the startle flinch is positive in a lot of ways, like you said. I mean, when you're talking about these complex movements, but then at the same time, I think we as humans have, and you alluded to this, a natural tendency to freeze, right? Which doesn't seem like it would be in our best interest. How do you tap into this a little bit more, the startle flinch, and really hone this when it seems to be unconscious?
The biggest thing is just creating awareness for it, right? So if I get you to acknowledge it and also reframe it, because when somebody looks at somebody flinching, it always looks like some, cowardly, scared.
Right.
If you can look at a picture. I got a picture of, let's say, Mike Tyson flinching in the ring, and in that moment, although it's Mike Tyson, there's something incongruous because his eyes are closed, his head is turned, he's pushing away danger.
Right.
I got MMA fighters, and what we do in our courses, we say, listen. This is physiology bypassing cognition. This means that your opponent broke your rhythm, or something's about to hit you and it bypassed your cognitive awareness. So number one, to what you said, startle flinch is absolutely a positive, because listen, when somebody goes through a car windshield in a car accident because they weren't wearing a seatbelt and they didn't have an airbag, there's always trauma on the forearms and hands. No one's head gets hit first. It's always the hands. That's how fast this is.
Wow. Same
thing in a knife attack. Same thing. You look at the forensics wounds. They call them defensive wounds, but they're startle flinch responses where your hands come up before your head can get hit. It's amazing. So we've figured out a way to weaponize that. But in terms of what this talk is more about, is understanding how to apply that and understand it. It's one is being open to learning. So there's a lot of people that reject this research because it challenges believe it or not, their definition of what a man looks like in a fight.
So you're talking about worrying more about the ego and looking cool than the ability to successfully defend yourself.
Correct. The startle flinch is the equivalent of an organic airbag, right? It deploys without your permission. Imagine if you had to, in a car accident, push a button to deploy an airbag. Like it couldn't happen, right?
Right.
You're driving along, all of a sudden someone goes through a light and you go, shit. Like you're not going to, oh shit. And then suddenly find that button near your volume on your radio.
Sure.
So some genius figured out how to create sensors in a car that when it got impacted at a certain pressure, it would deploy an airbag, which would hopefully create a buffer between you and impact and save your body and your face. That's what your Startle flinch does in the violent encounter. So yeah, there's a lot of people, unfortunately, in the more technical combative arenas that look at that as silly. There's a lot that get it. It doesn't readily apply or transfer to like a ring or combat sport per se.
Right, because you've got a lot of cooperation there. There's certain rules, there's guidelines, there's, hey, you can't do this, you can do this, here's the time frame, here's the restrictions, here's the guidelines, and we're going to operate within these parameters. But a violent mugger, for example, doesn't have any rules, and he's going to do whatever he wants and whatever he can to complete his objective.
Right, and that's the big thing. And going back to the story of the sucker punch drill in 1988 with Warren, my ego, my ability to anticipate and predict the future was predicated on the fact that I was always the instructor saying, this is the drill we're going to do.
You knew the script.
Right. Well, and even if we got into the ring, someone would say, hey, I forgot my mouth guard. I go, okay, we'll just go to the body. We'll just kick the legs and like no headshots. Right. So there was always like in MMA, no fish hooks, no guns, no knives. You can't have your buddy with a sniper rifle in the stands. Right. There are like certain rules you set up. And so the thing what messed me up in this 1988 drill was I had changed who gets to move when at what distance. I said to Warren, you go when you want in the middle of a conversation. So that was almost like the Jack in the Box. So visualize the Jack in the Box. You know the music? You could be up close. You know the clown's going to pop. You know that lid's going to lift and there's a clown going to pop up. You can sit there with two fingers up, like getting ready to finger jab, and crank that, and the clown's head will always pop up before you can hit it with a finger jab, because action's faster than reaction. This is the big thing that I want people to get. Anybody who and of course, your show is more about how we think about how we behave and what we can do to be better people, better human, better dads, better fathers, and so on and so forth. My bias, and it's not unconscious, it's a conscious bias, is I really believe that every protector is wondering, what would I do if, like you see something in the news, what would I have done there? And at the end of the day, whether you say, well, that's why I carry, or that's why, whatever bullshit answer and I don't mean that to insult people, but it's a bullshit answer, like unless you've actually done that stuff. At the end of the day, your ability to pull the metaphoric trigger on decision making, the mind navigates the body. It's part of the neural circuitry of decision making is going through a fear loop of actually having that anticipation. Okay, I'm now going to jump out of an airplane. Okay, is my chute going to open? There's a moment of managing fear, and so on and so forth. But, going back to real quick, the issue with the Startle flinch and Warren, what I realized is when he could decide whether he was going to throw an uppercut or an overhand or hit me to the body, and I didn't know where it was, and we weren't dancing. There was no kind of like a violent dance going on. We weren't
like a rhythm almost, right?
Yeah, the rhythm of MMA or jiu-jitsu or Thai boxing. There's a rhythm that the fighters, based on the rules of engagement, that they can dance to. And some days you're the bug and some days you're the windshield, but you show up at a certain time, at a certain weight, and you've already signed off on certain rules. It's interesting, when Tyson bit Holyfield, right?
Sure. Yeah.
People remember that?
Yeah.
It was the Startle flinch that tore the earlobe off, right? So Tyson's biting him with a mouth guard. I don't know if he had the mouth guard in or out, regardless. He's in there. If you watch it carefully, Holyfield's face is like, what the fuck? And then he flinches and he pushes
and that's
Tyson
when
away.
He pushed away.
And that was, but the concept is Tyson introduced a stimulus too quickly that wasn't part of the rule book. If you introduced biting into boxing, people wouldn't get bit.
Right, they're prepared for that.
Yeah, now suddenly. And so awareness changes everything. Awareness changes everything.
And I think we have a tendency to probably overestimate our abilities in these situations, which is why you say they give the BS answer. I'm really curious how you improve what you've dubbed and termed your response ability, as in how you're going to, or are you able to respond in these situations? Yeah.
So, those of you listening to this, just picture the word responsibility, put a hyphen between response and ability, and really turn it around. It's your ability to respond. After 37 years of teaching, I get asked all the time, like, did you ever see Presidio with Sean Connery?
No, I don't think I did.
No matter who he had to fight in there, he would take his thumb and he would hit the jugular notch right in the neck. And that was his move. And he'd do it, with his Scottish accent. He'd go, and then all of a sudden the thumb would come in there. And it's hysterical.
So refined, right?
Yeah. And it was like he would just drop everybody like Spock, like in the. And so I use that joke. I guess that's dating how old I am. People are like Googling Presidio. Who's Sean Connery? Right?
I know I kind of tend to think of like Matt Damon in some of these, these shit, right? But I see where you're coming from.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is because it was like a move that worked, that thumb. So what everyone's always looking for is this like the holy grail move. So people are always for years, just show me the secret move. I was talking about my father-in-law, Fred. He stopped asking me this about 5 years ago, but for about almost 20 years, he'd come out and he'd say, T, just show me one move. Show me one move if something happens. I go, there isn't a move. There's 4 moves. There's situational awareness. If you don't know something's wrong, it doesn't matter what you know. So you could know everything and you could know 0, but if you have no awareness, you're still getting fucking hit.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be a fight. Right? It could be your business gets taken away from you. Someone starts cheating on you. If you have no awareness, it's just going to hit you. The next thing is when you have awareness, you will get a fear spike. Right? So we're talking about like something outside your comfort zone.
Which is good. I mean, that's a response that you need to understand, which is part of this no fear thing.
Well, this is the whole thing, is that if you embrace the K-N-O-W fear, where you go, okay, I just got a fear spike about that. Am I being paranoid? Should I get prepared? What do I have to learn about this? It's self-actualizing. You become a better person that's what we mean by there's no such thing as no fear, N-O fear, but there is a way to get to no fear by embracing it, by looking at it, not chasing it, but committing to your self-actualization, your evolution by going, that scared me. Is this something that I have to do again? Is this like an FAQ in my life, right? And I should get, I should get good at it. So those 4 stages are situational awareness, fear spike, and being able to acknowledge what that is.
Which with that, before you get into the other 2, I think there's an important distinction here. And this is one thing I found is when you're talking about knowing fear, I think it's recognizing what that fear is trying to tell you. So should you actually disengage from the situation you find yourself in? Or is this something that's simply going to push you outside of your comfort zone? But understanding what it is valuable.
Right. That's a very cool question, really. And so my answer, if you had trained with me before, and you're more than welcome to come to any of our courses as a guest of mine, one of the things I always say to people, it depends on the scenario. That's my default answer.
Yeah.
Right? So we talk about the 3 Ds when we're teaching our self-defense. And the reason why I love the self-defense model is it's transcendent. By teaching you to protect yourself, at the end of the course, you look at me and I go, Ryan, will you do everything you can to protect yourself, your family, and decide if you want to be a courageous bystander? And everybody at the end of the course just about will go, absolutely. And I go, so now your job doesn't scare you, your boss doesn't scare you, your mom doesn't scare you, your whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, we all think that it's, like I said earlier, there's this weird specter in the dark that's hiding under the bed, but that's not really what ruins most people's lives. It's the everyday little fear of some sort of assertion or confrontation and confrontation management that they don't understand. So your question is too specific for a philosophical discussion. It should just be, I just got a fear spike about this. Is it, oh, wait a minute, let me think about that. Oh, no, it's not a stomach ache. It's I forgot to eat dinner last night. I went to bed early and I was freaking out. I thought something was wrong with me. Like, you have the conversation with yourself. That's a silly example, but it's, you have to actually not wish for this fear spike, but acknowledge it and then embrace it. And that's your first step to getting to no fear, because your next step is actually managing the fear, which is we've come up with a super slick acronym for it that I think you'll dig and your listeners will dig. It's when you get to the point where you go, okay, I just got this phone message that my business partner is doing this, or my wife or my fiance just decided to do this, or this guy's coming to beat my ass, right? And there's this gap between stimulus and response called refractory delay. And that's you sitting there, right? And you're going, oh, what should I do? And maybe you have 1 second, and maybe you have 1 week or a year. It doesn't matter. And there's lots of people, like philosophically, who finally sell their business and go do something, and they go, yeah, I've been meaning to do this for like 5 years, right? And they just wait. And what is it that's holding them back? It's their inability, not their inability to make a decision, their inability to look at fear. Because if you don't see what's holding you back, so fear is either this suppressor and it stymies growth and decision making, or it's a catalyst.
It's that almost the fault in the notion of ignorance is bliss, right? It's only bliss until it destroys you.
Right. And you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
So we start off with situational awareness. We go, oh, like that's not good. Fear spike. Now, what I can do is I can ignore it. I put blinders on and I go, that doesn't involve me. Or when I turn my back, or I go, okay, FAQ. Like, is this going to happen again? Do I know how I'm going to respond to this? And so courage, the act of making a courageous decision, it's almost like a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it gets, right? And so that's why I say, like, instead of answering specifically like, oh, you should do this and step to the side, and like the way, most complex motor skill martial arts are taught, like this is the answer to everything, just step over here and do this.
Or like a throat punch or a groin shot or whatever.
Right. And the real answer is what I said earlier, is what's the scenario? Because there's some scenarios where you don't do anything because it's going to make it worse. And there's some scenarios where, and I always tell people, like, what is the safest thing you can do here? So we have this little joke. We go #choose safety. And a lot of people confuse, like, the myopic person who really has this unconscious bias. The danger of that, of course, is that it's unconscious, where they see things through just their world, and they're not critical thinkers. They can't think about something without running it through how they think about it. Mm-hmm. In other words, they let it interfere there, right? Sure. And when I say, hey, you need to choose safety, they confuse that with playing it safe. That's not what life is about. We don't want to play it safe. What we want to do is, what is the safest thing I could do? So I can be in a situation where the safest thing I do is to kill the bad guy or play dead, right? And so like, that's a huge extreme with a bunch of variables in between. Right. Well, how do I make that decision? I need to manage my fear.
Gentlemen, just a quick break to talk with you about our show sponsor, RX-Bar. I love these things because I'm always looking for a quick, healthy snack when I'm working out. But a lot of these protein bars are more like a candy bar than something that's actually going to help me. And it turns out that real food ingredients, they actually taste really good, unlike some of this genetically engineered food groups, if you can call it that. RX bars come in so many different varieties. They're gluten-free, they're soy-free, they're dairy-free. There's no added sugar. There's no artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, none of the junk that you're going to find in a lot of these other bars. They're great for breakfast on the go, maybe a snack at the office. I eat them when I'm working out. Throw it in your bag if you're traveling and on a plane. Good for so many different situations that you may find yourself in. So here's what you can do. You can go to RX-Bar. That's RXBAR, rxbar.com/order-of-man. When you go there and you enter the promo code order-of-man at checkout, you're going to get 25% off of your first order. So it's rxbar.com/order-of-man, and then you use order-of-man at checkout. Go check them out. I think you will enjoy them as much as I do. Now back to my conversation with Tony. What's the acronym in point number 3, managing that fear?
Yeah, so it's face it, F, understand it as much as you can, like understand really what's going on here. Then C, control or confront. And why I say control and confront, it's because I really believe philosophically that there is no such thing as the no fear. That I think that if I told you, hey, Ryan, like if you train with me like these 10 lessons and you buy my lifetime Ginsu knife set and you sign up right now, that you'll have no fear when you graduate this class. That's bullshit, right? And so if you buy into this idea that when you get to a certain level, you'll have no fear, what happens if your palms are a little sweaty that day? What happens if you have butterflies? What if you go, I wonder, did I work out enough this week? That puts doubt. Doubt creates hesitation. Doubt and hesitation unchecked becomes anxiety. Now you have fear again. But if the performance psychology model, right? So I don't believe in peak performance for this reason. I believe in performance enhancement, like a mindset that says, today I am here, it's game day, and I got to be as good as I can be today. But I might have not slept well. I might be fighting a flu. I can't be thinking like I'm not peaking today because I don't want I don't want this negative label in my head. So that's why I say C is confront and control, because I may not be in what modern performance psychologists refer to as flow today.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that even this morning. I was at the gym this morning and I was doing a benchmark workout and I missed it. I completely missed it.
How'd you feel?
I felt bad, man. I was down on myself this morning because I was that far off.
Right. What if you went into the workout? So I don't like running. So I've got 4 types of run. One of my runs is I feel like running today. One of my runs is I don't feel like running today. One of my runs is I'm being chased by bad guys and I can't, right?
Makes sense.
And so I give myself like an emotional, psychological. So what if I get up and I go, I feel like shit today, but I'm going to go work out because sometimes you need to do things when you don't feel like doing it. So my workout today is about mindset, not about PRing.
So you still won the workout because you defined it differently.
So if we had talked before your workout and I said, don't do the PR today, do the benchmark, but here's the workout you're going to do. This is the workout you do to not be a pussy. And this is the workout you do where you're going, fuck, I'm just going to grind through this. If I had asked you now, how was your workout? You'd have said, great.
Right.
If you would really embrace that mindset.
Interesting.
Isn't that cool?
So I'm assuming the last letter in that acronym is K, right?
Right. No. So that's our acronym, F.U.C.K, fuck fear, right? Face it, understand it, confront, control, and then you get to know fear. That doesn't mean your journey's over. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be faced with a similar threat a week later, a day later, a year later, and still have that fear spike, right?
Interesting.
It's just this mindset of going, okay, let's do this. Turning away from it is not going to make it go away. In fact, it might impact my self-esteem, my dignity, and my pride if it happens repeatedly.
And even compound the problem until you finally are forced to deal with it.
Yeah, 100%. I really believe, and it's like kind of my big mission this past year, and it's that cliche of where I say, and I've got a 26-year-old son, 20-year-old daughter, 16, and I'm sharing all this stuff with them, and they're looking at me like I'm an idiot. And I'm saying things like, I wish somebody had told me this when I was 25, and they're going, okay, thanks, Dad, gotta go. And I'm like laughing, going, wow, it's that cliche of like the things you realize when you're in your 50s or 60s, and then you say, I wish I'd known that, but you're on top of the world. You're invincible when you're at that age. And it's like, yeah, Dad, whatever. But I just keep peppering them, hoping some stuff will get in through osmosis.
You said there's a fourth move. So we went through the three. We went through situational awareness, the fear spike, and then managing the fear. What's the fourth move?
Functional movement.
So explain that.
The unconscious bias says this. If you're a Second Amendment concealed carry person that has no training and has never been in a gunfight, and you see some violent encounter online, what do you post in the thread? That's why I carry.
I would have just shot him. You should have done this. You should have done that. Right.
So the unconscious bias says that's my tool and I'm safe with my tool. If I take your gun away, you're like, right? And what if you're traveling somewhere where you don't have a gun, right? And so blah, blah, blah. If you're a jiu-jitsu player and something happens in the street, your unconscious bias says, I'd have just taken him down. I'd have choked him out. If you're Taekwondo, you'd say, I kick him in the face. If you happen to be like an Olympic sprinter, you'd go out a run. Like everyone has an unconscious bias. And I'm not dissing on anything. I'm just saying like, hey, violence doesn't care what style you practice. Violence doesn't care if you're, liberal or Republican. Violence doesn't care. And violence isn't always, for decades, I've been teaching about how to be safer, how to choose safety. And people confuse that with martial. I'm not teaching. Self-defense is about understanding how to not be in a confrontation. And people confuse self-defense with fighting, and people confuse self-defense with combat sports, and people confuse self-defense with martial arts. They're all different.
I mean, the point is to neutralize the threat in the most efficient and effective manner possible, right? Which means disengage in some cases.
Yeah. So in D1 is detect and avoid. D2 is defuse and de-escalate. And D3 is push comes to shove, be your own bodyguard, defend yourself. But if, we talk about, in the community, everyone talks about, hey, get to the left of the ambush, get to the left of the ambush. And then they practice how to get out of a choke or how to put on a choke or how to kick somebody, or how to hit somebody or to shoot somebody. That is all on the right of the ambush. All of those behaviors, all of those
after the fact
are after the fact. The fight has already started. So you're not going to develop any situational awareness, true situational awareness, if you don't practice D1 and D2, which is a huge part. Now, here's the thing is, with this is what came to me in the last couple of years after decades of teaching, was I was like, whoa, this is transcendent, that D1, D2, D3, detect, diffuse, defend. If I talk to you, you're visualizing it externally. You're seeing yourself as a dad and you're going, I got to be situationally aware. Well, what if I told you your situational awareness is directly impacted by your self-awareness or lack of, right? So D1, detect and avoid, has to do with what are the things that I'm thinking, what are the erroneous beliefs in my brain that change how I look at the world or people or communication or conversations, relationships.
How do you get familiar with that before we move on to diffuse?
A lot of it is, we do these one-day courses where like people come up after and they go, I learned more about life and self-defense and decision-making in a day than I have in 10 years of this or 15 years. It's just these epiphanies. Listen, I put this together after 37 years, I mean, cumulatively, I'm always reviewing my stuff, but it's been almost 4 decades of researching this stuff and teaching thousands and thousands of people around the world, from tier 1 operators all the way down to women and women's shelters, and noticing like language, concepts, drills, and behaviors that trigger immediate responses. It's almost like, you're at the range shooting and you're missing everything, and a guy comes by and he moves your thumb a little bit, and now suddenly you're zeroing in your shots, and all it was your thumb was in a ship position, and it affected everything. I was up at Coach Bergner's, 5-6 years ago. I was never, for those of you who don't know Coach Bergner, Olympic lifting coach, and I'm up there and working out at his house in a small little group. One of his trainers looks at me, and I come from a martial art background. I just, started getting into CrossFit and training. I'd never Olympic lifted in my life, and one of his trainers goes, "Hook grip, hook grip, hook grip." And I'm like, "What?" He says, "Hook grip. Coach is going to make you do burpees if you're not doing a hook grip." I'm like, what's a hook grip?
I don't even know what that is. Right.
So do you remember the day somebody showed you a hook grip?
Yeah.
Do you remember how much stronger and easier it was to lift with a hook grip?
Yeah, definitely.
So, for those of you who have no clue, you just got to go to the gym and do a deadlift and do it with a hook grip, and you'll understand. But sometimes somebody can show you something or tell you something where I liken it to, like, people come up to me all the time, Ryan, they go, "This is common sense." And I go, "No, it's not. It's uncommon sense."
Right. It might be, you might know it, but that doesn't mean everybody knows it.
Right. I go, "If it was common sense, you wouldn't be telling me this is common sense."
No one
because
would have to say it.
You're like, "Wow, this is common sense." And I joke, I go, "It's uncommon sense." Uncommon sense is that moment where you hear it once and you get it. And what I try to do is I try to inspire, and I work very, very hard on the language and the presentation. I did a course in London a couple of years ago. Then I had another course. It was 2 courses between London and Amsterdam, and I rewrote my lesson plan 5 times in a week. You speak to my staff, they're like, "Oh, fuck, the Sunday night phone call. We dread that, brother." And I tell them, I go, "Hey, man, this course isn't for you. It's for our students." Right. And if I get a new idea for something, so I'm constantly changing shit. So what I'm looking for is that hook grip experience. So you ask me, like, how do people get from here? How do they realize this? Or how do they make this connection? That's the magic of the language, right? Where you do 2 things. One, I say something, you go, "Oh my God, I never thought about it that way." I just had a guy who's a retired professional Thai boxer, MMA guy. He came to one of my one-day courses, and he's the typical guy that I dread in the class, because my course isn't designed for people who have an unconscious or conscious bias. It's really for just people who just normal, good citizens, right?
Sure.
Good Samaritans.
Sure.
Who go, "I really don't know what I do here, blah, blah, blah."
Because sometimes they have to unlearn that stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, because they look at it through, listen, like, somebody who's been a cop or military, and I'm telling them, "Oh, you're going to feel fear here." Like, I was in a meeting last year where a really violent incident happened, and this chief of police goes, "I can't believe the fuck were they doing sitting there? Like, why didn't somebody?" And I'm like, "Dude, you've been a cop for 20 years. You've been in gunfights. Everyone there was just a citizen going, 'Oh my God.'"
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so people don't realize that the stress inoculation they've experienced in real life makes it seem easy. It's almost like the magician understands the trick. The audience has no clue what's going on. So you sit there like deer in the headlights, mesmerized, right? We demystify that. And that's what our gig is trying to demystify for people. And I was in the middle of telling you something else and I just forgot, but.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, you were talking about language, and one of the things that you had said a couple of times that I want to make sure we define is the idea of a courageous bystander. What is that?
Wow. So courageous bystander is, have you ever heard of the bystander effect? There's, like, if you Google it, you watch videos, it's what they do is they set up like child abductions or violent stuff, and they're filming from a distance, watching people just stay on their phones or look or film. And the bystander effect is like, I'm not going to be the person that gets involved.
Turn a blind eye almost.
Yeah. And you just, at the end of the day, and this is peeling the onion, is what the show's about. If I could pull everyone who walked by and I said, "Why didn't you do something?" And go, "I didn't want to get involved, legally, I go, "No, but really, why didn't you get involved?" When you peel the onion, they're scared.
Right.
They're scared of getting sued. They're scared of getting hurt. They're scared of becoming the victim, and so on and so forth. And I really believe that. And that's like, again, where I was going. So the courageous bystander is in our course. And I want to try and explain this in a way because there's a couple of really big light bulb moments in the course. And so I don't want to do this disservice, but I don't want to ruin something.
Right. We don't want to take away from that for sure.
Right. There's like, and here's how the magic trick works. Right?
I don't need to go, I guess, right?
Exactly. So the courageous bystander is basically somebody who says, even though that's not my kid or my wife or me or my car, I'm not going to turn a blind eye. And courageous bystander doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to run in there and jump in there like some superhero. It might be just calling it in, hitting 911, taking a picture of that license plate, but it's having the balls and the courage and the will to do the right thing. And the way I define it, and people can go, that's obvious, like that's what I would do. The way we talk about it in our course is I go, if you weren't there as the protector, if you weren't there as the dad, and something was happening to somebody you really loved, would you want a courageous bystander to step in and do something? And we have lots of those everyday heroes in lots of incidents. We see them and they need to be celebrated more. But part of that is what holds somebody back from being that in anything in life is fear, their relationship with fear. Otherwise, there's a maxim we throw out at the end of every one of our courses. And basically it's, if you didn't fear, what would you do? In your life, if you had no fear, what would you do? Right? Everything you wanted to.
Absolutely.
It's heavy shit.
Interesting. Well, Tony, we're bumping up against time here, and obviously we're not nearly getting into all that we could talk about. I think we should do a follow-up, or guys can connect with you for sure. But before I get into that, let me ask you, what does it mean to be a man? Wow.
So that's something that I measure every single day. For a long, long time, I've done little rants to myself, and I'm online just to people that, life is the laboratory and life is the school, and the teacher, that's you and your brain, grades yourself every day. Did you get an F today? Did you get a D? Did you get I had an incident happen in business the other day, and I said to, one of my staff, I said, let me tell you how I look at things. I'm always willing to give up who I am today for who I could become by being introspective and honest with myself. I'm giving myself A for energy on that last project, but I'm giving myself an F on my attitude because I was a little bitch during that and I was really upset, right? And so what it means to be a man is just to always work on self-awareness. I think that's the biggest thing is like, okay, yeah, I was skewing that. I was twisting that. My bias, like I wasn't really listening there, or, it's such a big question. It's almost worth the entire duration of the podcast to talk about that. It means to be better and do the right thing. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to anybody else.
Yeah, it's powerful. And you make up a good point about it taking up an entire show. I mean, I've asked, I think 130 or 140 different high achieving men now what that means. And there's so many different answers, but all of them combined, I think, paint a pretty good picture. So appreciate the feedback there. How do we connect with you? How do we learn more, learn about your workshops, learn about the things that you're doing?
If you just want to see like a quick list of all of our courses, go to events.blauer.com. It's just a page that has all our upcoming events. But Blauer S.P.E.A.R, my last name, B-L-A-U-E-R, S.P.E.A.R, one word. S.P.E.A.R is our self-defense program.com. Of course, I'm on Instagram, and we just started a super cool show called No Fear. People can just, Google that. So we're just trying to get this out there. But I think if you Google me, you should be able to find me. And I would love to do, if you get some good feedback and good questions, I'd love to jump on. This is a lot of fun, man. You're great at inspiring conversation. So I dig that.
I appreciate it, man. And I appreciate you. Obviously, this is something I think I need to know more of in my life. And of course, all the men listening do as well. So thank you, Tony, for taking your time, imparting some of your hard fought and hard earned wisdom with us. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
There it is, gentlemen. A powerful, powerful conversation with Tony Blauer. I think you would agree. I definitely encourage you to check out his work. Odds are that you're going to have to use some of the information that he teaches in your life. I hope that's not the case, but I certainly don't want to be unprepared, and I'm sure that you don't either when and if that time comes. Outside of that, guys, make sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you do the social media thing. We're also actually picking up speed and more content over on YouTube. So if you're over there, you may want to check us out there too. It's all at Order of Man. We're going to make it easy on you. So whether that's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, all at Order of Man. And guys, as I sign out, please, if you would, do me a favor and yourself a favor, because this is going to impact your life as well. Go pick up a copy of Sovereignty, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Men. As I told you earlier, we hit number 1 in multiple categories, but we are just getting started. I'm just getting warmed up with this thing, but I need your support in doing that like you have been for the past 3 years, and I am very, very grateful for that. Buy one for you, buy one for your brother, your cousin, your colleague, your coworker, your dad, whoever it may be. more and more men need to hear this message. With that, guys, I'll sign out today, and I will look forward to talking with you next week. But until then, take action and become the man you are meant to be.
Thank you for listening to the Order of Man podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and be more of the man you are meant to be, we invite you to join the Order at orderofman.com.